Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Cybersecurity Basics for E-commerce. Today is Wednesday, March 9th, and my name is Nick Fry. I'm the Manager of Business Development with Tourism Nova Scotia, and I again want to thank you for joining us for this webinar. Just a bit of housekeeping up front. We really encourage any questions and answered at the bottom of the screen. So if you have anything that pops into mind throughout the webinar, please ask the question. We also want to let you know that if myself or our Arbuckle Media mentions any software or any links or anything relevant, we will share that with you after the fact. So you don't need to scribble it down or worry about that. We will definitely take care of that and share it with you. And if you have any great ideas for future webinars, just let us know through our feedback. The webinar will also be recorded. So if you think there's something really great you want to review again, if you want to share it with a friend, if we go past 11 and you have to go to another meeting, that's okay. It will be recorded and it will be available to you. So for those of you that are joining us for the first time, Tourism Nova Scotia is a division of communities, culture, tourism, and heritage. We work with communities and industry to attract visitors in the province. And our goal is to increase tourism revenues through experience and sector development, business coaching, marketing, and visitor servicing. Now, our partners on this call are Digital Nova Scotia, and they are the Industry Association for Nova Scotia's $2.5 billion ICT and digital technologies sector. They represent businesses, over 200 members, including startups, small and medium enterprises, multinational corporations, government, post-secondary institutions, and Digital Nova Scotia has just been the most excellent partner and enabled us to launch Digiport. So Digiport is a one-stop shop for interactive services. So any tourism business that's on the call today, if you're not in Digiport yet, you should be, and you can sign up at Digiport. It gives you many operational opportunities as well as educational opportunities. So it can help you bridge some digital capacity gaps. You could watch some of our previous webinars, sign up for future ones. There is all sorts of programming available to you through Digiport. So we would encourage you to sign up for Digiport. It is the only digital service of this kind for tourism businesses in Canada, available here in Nova Scotia, and really excited that it's here for you. So thank you for Digital Nova Scotia for helping bring that to the forefront. Now, I am going to welcome Joel Arbuckle on the screen in a second. Joel's the president of Arbuckle Media, which he founded in 2015. Arbuckle is a digital branding agency raising awareness using powerful social media, creative campaigns, and powerful branding execution. Joel's favorite projects are the ones where they get to take opportunity from current trends that major international brands are using, analyze the nuts and bolts of why and how they worked, and using that blueprint for smaller businesses in Nova Scotia. I realized my camera wasn't on, so there we go, here I am. And Joel says that what he loves most about growing his business in Nova Scotia is all the amazing people, communities, and brands that he gets to interact with. And he gets to see the unlimited potential of people all around and the province. So glad to have you here today, Joel. I hope that you have your camera on like I just found out I didn't have mine. I'd encourage you to share your screen. And everyone's really excited about today's presentation. Cybersecurity is of the utmost importance. And I think that not only is it important personally, it's also very important for our businesses as well. So thank you, Joel, and looking forward to the presentation.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Are you able to see my screen and hear me okay?
Yeah, and we can see your video as well. It's great. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you for that. All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a very topical sort of program around cybersecurity. This will be more formulated to smaller operators. It'll be really targeted at people who run websites, whether or not it's e-commerce driven. These all still apply to you, but we're going to focus primarily on a lot of common types of cybersecurity risks and attacks that will apply to e-commerce businesses in this webinar presentation. So let's sort of jump right into it. Here's what we'll cover. In the outline of this exercise, it's not really designed to be an in-depth analysis of any particular type of spam, scam, or cyber attack. However, it is designed to produce awareness of the different types of attacks, and how simple, cost-effective best practices and standards within your organization can cover many bases at once, and likely save you a lot of pain and frustration should you be the unfortunate subject of such an attack. So the overview of the topics we're going to cover would include why bad actors typically attack small business websites in particular, the types of attacks, what to look for, how to know when you're under attack, what to do before, during, and after an attack has taken place, the types of prevention methods you could use to prevent your business from becoming a victim or a substantial victim of these vicious online anonymous attacks, how to monitor for threats, basic steps to undertake when you find yourself under attack and what to do after, and an overview of the policies and procedures you could put in place today with your staff and your teams in order to prevent the spread of threats and the overall impact of an attack. So a lot of people are going to ask themselves, why me? Why a small business? Let's get familiar with the idea of why you are, in fact, from my perspective and from the perspective of cyber attackers, hackers, black hat hackers, the ideal candidate for an attack. You might ask yourself, what could they possibly have to gain? And it comes down to any information or records you have at all, financial or personal identifiable information about you, your customers, is a source of value to an attacker. 43% of cyber attacks target small businesses, and that trend seems to be only increasing year over year. And often small businesses are the weak link in a chain on the way to a bigger target. You could be a secondary soft target. Collateral damage and a direct first hit on the way to a bigger fish. Your organization really serves as a gateway to bigger and better targets, as an opportunity to test a cyber attacker or a hacker's skills, or use a lower risk method of validating information such as stolen credit cards or financial data. If your organization is connected to others, like an association, a government entity, you've just increased your risk of being targeted for an attack, simply because it's immeasurably easy, and I can speak from experience, it's immeasurably easy to attack a smaller business than it is to get into the systems of a larger entity. And that could be a customer, a vendor, a supplier. It could be a government entity, a non-for-profit that you're connected to. It could be an association or organization like Digital Nova Scotia, who has potentially greater, more valuable assets than you do, but you are already connected to them. So it's a sort of type of social engineering that they're looking to exploit. Malicious actors often look for ransom or other kinds of economic gain, but attacks can be perpetuated upon you for any array of motives, including political activism purposes. E-commerce is especially vulnerable because of its proximity to financial information. I mean, people are entering credit cards on your website. That's a high value, high impact target to an attacker. Hackers and bad actors know that, unfortunately, for many small businesses, cybersecurity is still an afterthought. It's unfortunate, but you just don't have the knowledge, expertise, the resources, or the outrage factor. You know, when a police department is contacted that someone's been attacked, they just don't have the resources to help you. And if there's no public ire or discourse in media coverage around you being attacked, then there's limited motives or resources available for you to help you. And consumers really have come to expect that their privacy and confidential information will be protected, or at least should be protected. And it's every consumer's right to demand security from the companies that they do business with or buy from. So let's cover the basic types of attacks. Now that you understand why they're targeting you, let's take a look at what to begin to look for and get familiar with the basic concepts of the types of attacks you will most likely encounter. Now, keep in mind, this is not an exhaustive list of all of the types of attacks that are out there. This is more so to help our understanding of what is happening out there in the grand scheme of things to other small and large organizations. We're going to cover the basic concepts of a few different, 6 to 7 different types of attacks. Some of these will apply to us in our personal lives, but we're going to focus more on business implications of these types of attacks throughout this webinar. And by understanding each of these types of attacks, really the goal is to understand what they look like, how they're conducted, and that can help us better prepare ourselves, our team, and our infrastructure for, unfortunately, an inevitable exposure to each type of attack. And what we're going to cover here is phishing or phishing scams, also known as social engineering, card running, card testing, carding, password or brute force attacks, malware and all the different types of malware, DOS or DDoS types of attacks, and in the IoT or Internet of Things type of attack, which I in particular find to be the most interesting because it's often one that people sort of forget. It's not part of their core infrastructure often, and it's something that's hardware driven, which is sort of a little different from your website or e-commerce platform in particular, but everything is connected, as we'll learn. So jumping right into phishing, social engineering is by far the easiest method to attack you with. If I were a black hat actor and I was going to set my sights on your business or your organization today, I would use social engineering every day of the week to get into your organization by finding the weakest link in your security network through human factors and social engineering. Really, people, including yourselves, are your greatest risk or your greatest vulnerability and liability. It's likely the most common attack you'll see as a small business and as an individual outside of your work life. It's often lumped in with spam. Phishing is really a type of fraud and social engineering that comes in many forms, serves a variety of purposes, and it really comes down to someone wanting to trick you, your employees, or even your grandmother into thinking they are who they say they are. You'll spot it through typically unusual requests, sometimes from known senders, intimidation from outside sources, ranging from big companies like Google all the way to government entities. I'm sure you've all heard of the Service Canada scams, coming to arrest you, coming to send you to prison, offers that sound too good to be true, and therefore typically are. Unidentified or unknown senders with important things to give you, with certain important and sudden information. And these can happen both over the phone and commonly through email. Often they'll come to you with invoices or links. Netflix could be contacting you to give you a refund, or the CRA could be contacting you to give you a tax refund you surprisingly didn't know you had. Well, unless you're expecting it, it's probably not true. And unless you're a customer of that organization or some sort of stakeholder, they're likely not contacting you out of the blue to give you any free money. The most common types of phishing are spear phishing, which are really hyper-specific targeted attacks directed at specific companies or individuals. Whaling, which is targeting typically senior executives and stakeholders within an organization, C-suite members, directors, owners. Farming is a very common one. You'll get a link to something. It may look like a Facebook login link or a Netflix login link or your banking login, or you'll get an e-transfer notification that really looks like it came from Interact, but in fact did not. It's a fake login landing page. And really the liability here is you can lose control of everything if you're subject to a phishing scam. And they're often leveraged to carry out further attacks, like a man-in-the-middle attack. They will spoof and fake and imitate your business and make people think that they're talking to you or able to trust you. And in fact, it's someone else behind the scenes, behind the form, gathering information that's inputted. Carding, also known as card testing or card running, there's a variety of names for all of these types of attacks. Really, carding is the testing of stolen credit card or financial and banking information against your system, usually in order to get free products, services, or gift cards from your business. However, more often, really the purpose of this is if I've stolen credit card information, banking information, I'm testing it. I have typically a list of hundreds, if not thousands, of these credit card numbers, and I'm testing them in large batches with a bot to see which ones are still working, which ones haven't been reported as stolen, which ones haven't been picked up by the system as fraud. And I want to know which ones I can make the big score with, which ones I can go to Best Buy and walk away with a 65-inch 4K TV with and not have an issue with. This is a great indicator. And unfortunately, I'm going to test your systems to get there. Order sizes vary. This is really how you'll spot it, is you'll see a number of credit cards being run in a short period of time. Typical lowbrow scam is going to have the same name, same address, same information in it. Probably the same IP address coming from the same computer or same range of computers. And it's all going to have bogus information, which they're hoping that will work and will trip by your system. And typically there's two schools of thought here with these sort of small orders. You'll see small orders from a lot of customers at once, or you'll see small orders from places far away that would require probably more than the order value in shipping. That's one way. The other school of thought is really to do a major transaction up front. This is the way that I would do it. If I were to take your credit card today, I would go for the big score immediately. The system, there's too many systems in place now. They catch these small, the big payment processors, I should say, catch these small order triggers as well as the big ones. So I would go for a big score if I was going to do this today. And sometimes they're run manually, but often it's a bot running them. So it'll be in quick succession, many, potentially tens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of transactions per minute, depending on the shape, size, scope, and ability of the attacker. And really the liability here is that this can result in some pretty painful housekeeping. It can result in chargebacks being charged, subject as being a unwitting accomplice to credit card fraud by law enforcement, and even compromising the relationship between you and your payment processor, because your payment processor doesn't want to process all of these. If you're not protecting yourself and not protecting your systems, your payment processor, it's much cheaper to drop you as a client and customer than to conduct investigation and audit a bunch of financial transactions. So, and we've seen it happen before where it does put a relationship with your payment processor at risk. Brute force and password attacks. This is a very, very common, widespread method of authenticating access to a secure information system, making it really an attractive target for cyber attacks. By accessing a person's password, an attacker can really gain entry to confidential or critical data or information, including the ability to manipulate said system. So if I'm able to log in as you, I'm able to become you. I'm able to grant my friends access and kick your team out. Password attackers use a myriad methods to identify an individual password, including social engineering within phishing. They also use attacking the database where the password is stored as a method, and sniffing packets on an unencrypted network or transmission signal. Simply guessing. This is sort of where brute force comes in. Brute force is a type of password attack where I run a system or a bot to try thousands and thousands of the most common passwords, password 123, potentially your birthday, all at once in quick succession. And often they're successful. There's a reason there's a dictionary published that you can likely Google and find the most common passwords. There's also trending articles on the top 20 most common password lists. And really the liability here, as I said, is compromised accounts, loss of control of assets or infrastructure. And really the worst part about this is it's entirely preventable. And there's a lot of myths around passwords we will get into during the prevention segment of this webinar. Next one I want to talk about is malware. You've probably heard of some sort of form of malware throughout as early as the 90s. You've probably heard of computer viruses, worms, spyware, adware, ransomware. I'll sort of go over a quick preview of each one. The term malware includes spyware, viruses, Trojans, worms, ransomware, and And viruses are probably one of the most common types of a form of malware. They infect applications, attaching themselves to the initialization sequence. And much like a real virus, it replicates itself. It not only infects other code in the system, but they try to propagate and progenate themselves across your system, across your customer system, and other devices. They will spread themselves. Trojans are programs hiding inside a useful program for malicious purposes. Unlike virus, the Trojan doesn't replicate itself, but it's typically set up as a backdoor, a way after I've had my fun with your system, with your banking information, I can come back and try and find out if you changed your password. So simply changing your password is only one step of the process, as we'll get into. Worms, unlike viruses, they don't attack the host. They're self-contained programs that propagate across networks and computers. They're often installed through email attachments. So that's what you'll get as a PDF invoice from someone you didn't expect to have send you a bill. They send themselves a copy of every contact in the infected list, so they know who's vulnerable now. They often use to overload an email server and achieve a DOS or a denial of service attack. Ransomware is very common now. It's a type of malware that denies access to the victim's data. It's like if you have files, important files on your computer, you no longer can access those because I have gated those and encrypted them. I can now extort you for the information in there, and I can try to potentially make money from you. And without the decryption key, you have no chance of recovering that information ever. And I've seen it happen to colleagues and contacts in the industry. And the rule of thumb is if you pay, they will play. Attackers have sort of an honor amongst thieves. They're aware that they need to release the information if you pay, but it's not going to come cheap. More than 100 million US dollars in digital ransoms were paid in 2021 alone, and reports of ransomware attacks were up 105% year over year last year. Spyware is a type of program installed to collect information about users, their systems or browsing habits, send the data to a remote user. The attacker can then use the information for blackmailing purposes or to download other malicious programs from the web on your behalf. Really, the liability here is malware is a true virus on your system, on your customer's hardware. It can destroy your hardware, make it unusable, brick it. It can do the same to your customers and completely eliminate and destroy trust. DOS, also known as DDoS, attacks, they really work by flooding systems and servers and or networks with traffic and packets to overload resources and bandwidth. The result is rendering the system unable to process and fulfill even legitimate requests. In addition to denial of service, DOS attacks, there are also distributed denial of service attacks, DDoS. As you can see in the picture here, this is more of a DDoS example where you have networks across networks of computers or devices, virtual machines, infected real person devices. So your computer could be contributing, if it is infected with a worm, to a DOS attack. And really what that is it's a bunch of pings. One example is a buffer overflow, where it's the most common type of attack experienced. It really is just overloading your website or your web host with traffic and with information, with packets, so that real customers can no longer find you online. It's really easy to execute these attacks as well. It's probably one of the most pervasive cybersecurity threats that modern organizations have to face. DOS attacks are simple and effective, and they can really bring devastating damage to people. And another liability really is not only hurting your infrastructure and costing you money, but damaging the relationship between you, your developers or web developers, and your infrastructure hosts, your server hosts, your website hosts. Much like credit card processors, they just won't want to deal with you. They don't want to have anything to deal with someone who is not protecting themselves from a DOS or DDoS attack. Common signs and symptoms are poor connectivity, slow performance of your website or network service, high demand on your analytics for a single page or endpoint, unusually high demand, I should say. Crashes, unusual traffic coming from a single or small group of IP addresses, especially overseas ones. If you're selling products locally and you do not ship outside of the province and you're getting an abundance of traffic from a known hotspot overseas, it's likely they're not all of a sudden discovering the new viral sensation of their region and in your product or service. It's likely a type of attack or a type of prodding for an attack, for an imminent and impending attack. And a spike in traffic from users with a common profile. So you can look at system model, geolocation, web browser version, et cetera, as a sort of sign or symptom. And really your website visitors could be adversely affected. You'll see your website go down and crash. Your website's reputation may drop in both terms of perceived brand reputation from your customers or in terms of authority from crawlers like Google. So it'll cost you time and money to repair the damages if this occurs. So again, very lightweight way to attack, very simple, lots of vulnerable websites out there, very easy to bring into view. Internet of Things attacks. So this is more so a hardware-based attack. It's particularly interesting because I have a bit of an anecdote to share with you today. If you have a location, such as a restaurant, a tap room, even a lounge or seating area for customers or clients, public Wi-Fi, or you allow others to use your Wi-Fi, you have smart devices, as pictured here, a very common one in Google Home, smart plugs, POS or other consumer electronics. They're all significant liabilities to security. Internet connectivity across every imaginable device does create a lot of convenience and ease for individuals and businesses. And it presents an almost unlimited number of access points for attackers to exploit and wreak havoc. Much like your Wi-Fi modem and a weak password, a weak unsupported IoT or hardware device that's connected, a smart device, makes it possible for attackers to breach an entry point quite easily and use it to gate yourself out of your own systems, or start sniffing the information that's already in there and exploit other devices in the network and create more vulnerabilities. They're becoming more popular due to the rapid growth of IoT smart devices. And in general, low priority is given to embedded security in these devices and their operating systems. Really, it comes down to they're hard to defend and predict. The plus side is typically attackers, not always, but typically attackers must be in some sort of physical proximity to your business. A couple of examples would be the Apple art hack. So an attacker came to an Apple store, and decided that they were going to have an art demonstration and take control of all of the users in the stores and the actual hardware on display, take control of these devices and display their art on it. They did that through the free public Wi-Fi at the Apple store. Another one that was particularly interesting through a smart device was in Las Vegas, Nevada. A casino was attacked, and the hacker gained entry to their systems, to all of their systems, to their databases, to their website, through an internet-connected thermometer inside of one of the fish tanks in the casino, on the casino floor. All that was required was the knowledge and expertise, particularly some cheap hardware, and just by simply walking on the floor and finding the device, finding the SSID or the network ID, as you would see come up on your phone. I've had it happen at home where sometimes a smart plug, typically a cheaper one, would find itself unattached to my home network, and anyone could try and join to that network, creating a massive vulnerability. If someone in my neighborhood or someone driving by, someone knowing I'm connected to other organizations, could simply park on the side of the road and try to tap in.
Joel,
Now,
sorry, I had a question for you. So now, does that work like they kind of, it's almost, in my mind, I'm picturing like a leapfrog, like they'd go from your home, Google Home, to your back to your Wi-Fi, then into your other devices? Is that how that would work?
Exactly. All I need is a gateway. All I need is one entry point,
Okay.
and I'm in. At that point, I'm likely able to exploit that device. I'm able to get potentially your Wi-Fi password. And the key really is a cheap gateway into other transmissions. So in other words, I'm able to go from this IoT device, the smart device, to your modem, whether that's at home or in your office. And then from that, I'm able to sniff all the packets up and down. So I'm able to see you log into Facebook, or you log into your POS or banking information, and I'm able to sniff those packets. And at that point, I might as well just have a keylogger stored on your device. That would be the equivalent. So it's really one weak link in the chain of your cybersecurity infrastructure. Thanks for the question. So let's talk about prevention methods now. Really what we're going to do is cover some basics here. We're going to cover some general tips, and we're going to cover each of the types of attacks that I just outlined, and some basic steps and some really useful tools that are out there. I will disclaim that I can recommend systems that we use, that we've used for clients in the past. However, this is, of course, not an ad, so we're not sponsored by any of the programs, plugins, platforms that we might recommend. And sort of your experience may vary across each type of platform. You may not have the budget for each one. However, we do typically promote and really recommend premium plugins, apps, services, because often you do get what you pay for, and we'll cover that a little bit. So really, you're going to ask yourself, what do I do? What do I do up front before I become a victim, before I've been attacked? So we have some sort of general rules here that'll cover sort of all bases, and then we'll get into more specifics by each type of attack. In general, make it hard for attackers. You're likely not worth it. You and your business aren't likely a major organization or government entity, so it's likely not worth the hassle. Unless I'm really trying to hone my skills, I'll likely move on to someone who's a little bit easier, who's more unprepared than you are. There are so many businesses out there for them to target, so many soft targets, that I don't want to waste time on yours if it's too difficult, and if you're set up properly. The easiest way to minimize your risk is to create a system that is thorough, rigid, and ultimately enforced without exception. Even yourself, treating yourself like you would treat your vendor or subcontractor or employee and team. Don't make exceptions for yourself. Don't cut corners. Assume that websites or any touch point of technology is a liability and inherently insecure. Don't store hard text records of any login credentials. And I mean that digitally and physically. I can't tell you throughout my career how many times I've walked in and seen Twitter passwords on a post-it note on someone's monitor. Absolutely the easiest way to socially engineer someone. I could take a meeting with you, and when you're not looking, I could either write it down. I could I have my phone with me at all times. I could take a picture of your password, and that's all I need. That's a really easy way to social engineer someone. Just go down to their office, see what's kicking around on their desk without even having to touch anything. I could probably get a picture of someone's login. I know I could have in the past if I had wanted to. Use VPNs whenever and wherever possible, even on your own devices, on your own networks, especially if you're using a device that has access to your business accounts or confidential information while you're not home on either at home or in the office on your own networks. A VPN really creates a tunnel to not only protect your data, but your IP address as well. IP addresses really are like a flag that can draw attention to your location and whereabouts, and can help build a profile and socially engineer who you are. I can see where you're going once I flag your device, and I can see what types of IPs you're phoning in from. And I can create really a user profile picture of you if I'm looking to social engineer you, especially if you are a key target of my attack. Create and identify key stakeholders who will act as a response team. So really creating putting in decision makers, and we'll go over this as part of the policy and procedure prevention. Really identify who's going to act or react in real time. And Another one is don't require regular password changes. This is a huge myth, and unfortunately, most government entities still do this. You'll see every 15, 30, 90 days, a new password will be required. You'll have to update a password. This is a huge misconception in the industry. There are different schools of thought about this, but ultimately a secure password is the best password. Password age has little to do with security. Periodic passwords, changes have little or no positive impact on your cybersecurity infrastructure. It's because most password-based attacks have more to do with bad passwords. Ultimately, it has more to do with phishing attacks and bad passwords, and nothing to do with age. I would rather, it'd be much easier to guess someone who's constantly updating passwords to commit to memory to keep it. You'll likely keep it a newer password simpler, or a password that you have to change. I wouldn't make it complex. If I have to change it every 90 days, I would probably go with password 1, and then in 90 days, password 2, and then password 3, and so on. And that just makes it too easy. So honestly, it has, it's not even a point of diminishing returns. It's actually just has an adverse effect, and that is what really is intended. And ultimately, educate yourself. Educate yourself on what's out there, what's happening, what's trending. Your education really will never cease with respect to cybersecurity, because technology and good actors and bad actors are always evolving. And I can't stress this enough. Websites are inherently fragile and should always be treated like they are not secure. Just as you may treat a firearm as if it were always loaded at any point. You should never assume that your website is safe and stable in stasis, especially if you haven't updated it. If you're not keeping it routinely updated, it's safe to assume that there is a vulnerability. It may not have been exploited yet, but it soon will come. Just always assume that improvement can and should be made, and you cannot set it and forget it with a website, no matter how static the website content is. Especially when websites haven't been updated in a number of years. That creates a number of vulnerabilities. That is why when we build infrastructure for clients, one of the questions we ask is, when is the last time an update was made? That gives us a couple of indicators of one, what can we do, and what is different in the business that we could help with a website or with an e-commerce platform in development. But it also gives us an indication of how often are things being updated, and are the files, the data, the code that is on the website, is it stale, and potentially is it vulnerable, or could something be in there that needs to be scanned out or destroyed or quarantined? And remember that everything is connected to everything that is connected to anything is a vulnerability. Personal devices of employees, even if they're not logged into your accounts, but are just simply on your Wi-Fi during a shift or during the run of their day, are liabilities. Smart devices, POS systems, your website are all connected now and are part of a bigger picture of your cybersecurity infrastructure and the inventory of cybersecurity liabilities that you own and use. So now we'll move on to more common broad stroke ways to prevent more specific types of attacks. But these are sort of general rules, or you may use the term rule of thumb, in terms of how you should, the lens with which you should look at your cybersecurity. So phishing, again, likely one of the most common methods of an attack. And new methods are being developed all the time, but they certainly share commonalities that can be identified if you know what to look for. There's many sites online that can keep you informed of the latest phishing attacks and their key identifiers. The earlier you find out about the latest attack methods and share them with your users through regular security awareness training, even 15 minutes of a monthly meeting to kind of keep things up to date would be a bare minimum, but still enough to keep things, keep that part of your culture would be important and would be likely to help you avoid a potential attack. The best thing you can do is raise awareness within your organization, share resources, share these updates, periodically review your cybersecurity policy with your team to ensure that they understand it, to ensure they're using it, to ensure there's no liabilities or exceptions being made. Don't click on links or files that people send you, even if it really looks like someone you have to be sure. There's a few ways of being sure. One is making sure that even if John Smith is sending me an invoice and I'm expecting to get that invoice, it could still be a phishing scam. One way to check for sure is really making sure that the email that it's coming from in the sender file or in the sender field is the right one. John Smith at smithscompany.com. You will see often people spoof names and spoof email addresses as well. It's not a surety. And it could be that John Smith actually didn't have any cybersecurity protection and he's now being phished and scammed. So it's not foolproof. It is tough, but used in concert with good cybersecurity measures, as we'll discuss in here, it could be one way to avoid. Really, at the end of the day, if you're not sure, pick up the phone and call, do your own social engineering, ensure that the person on the other end hasn't been compromised. Ask to meet them in person, talk to them on the phone, make sure they are who they say they are before you simply download something and execute the file. Don't be tempted by pop-ups. Don't be tempted by offers. I don't know how many times a family member has come to me with Costco gift cards on Facebook, simply by liking, sharing information, entering, clicking links from fake Facebook profiles. They're everywhere, and they want to tempt you with different offers. Pop-ups want to tempt you with different scare tactics sometimes, as we'll see in a malware, on the malware slide. There's different ways to identify these, but typically if an offer is too good to be true, or if someone is threatening you and you didn't expect to get threatened, it could quite well be a part of a phishing scheme. If you get a strange link or file, report it back to the real sender, of course, and also report it to your mail host. If it's through email, you can mark it as spam. And you can also get free anti-phishing add-ons and spam filters on your email account. A lot of the big systems like Google Workspace have these built in. They're fairly robust. As you can see in the screenshot here, reporting spam is quite easy. And you can also do this for your website as well. There's a number of plugins and tools that you can use, like Google's reCAPTCHA or CAPTCHA method is basically a behind the scenes way of seeing if someone is a bot who's sending you information. It helps weed this out. There are still manual ways to get around these, but this will help diminish the amount of volume of spam or phishing attempts you're receiving. And another way that I've also been working on myself with my own team and my clients is test your team really by phishing them. Create burner or fake accounts. Use Gmail or Hotmail accounts and send them emails. Maybe sound loosely like how you normally would. A member of my team received a phishing attempt that had the same sign-off that I typically send in an email. And of course, she knew right away that it was a strange request. It didn't make any sense, but it looked pretty good. I was actually kind of impressed, and they're getting better all the time. However, also do know that poor spelling and grammar, people may think that a lot of these scams are coming from countries like Nigeria, like India. These countries have great English-speaking programs and English reading and writing programs. Don't be fooled. A lot of the times, poor English, poor grammar, and spelling are actually ways of qualifying or disqualifying potential phishing victims. People who are, undereducated, less than tech savvy, may in fact be more vulnerable or more susceptible to scams, and they know this, and they're using this. If you're able to overlook an important request that has a ton of run-on sentences and grammatical errors and spelling mistakes, you're probably more my target than someone who is a little bit more sophisticated, who is well educated, who is educated on what to look for. I don't want to deal with a lot of hassle coming back to not making it easy. I'm trying to find out who's going to make it easy for me simply by sending my first email. Carding and card testing. Now, this is not for everyone. Again, this comes down to if you require payments through some sort of method with card not present transactions. In other words, over the phone, via your website, your e-commerce platform, whether you're booking, whether you're selling products or services. Card testing prevention really comes down to working with your payment processor, using a good one, and working with them to help avoid credit card fraud or financial fraud in real time. A couple of methods: implement CVV verification. So 3-digit code on the back of your card, as you can see here, or also known as the security code for a credit card, require this at all stage. A lot of payment processors do require this. It is one default prevention method that they're using now. But make sure if there's an option that you are requiring this, and that it's a logical factual test that must be passed in order to proceed with a transaction. Use postal code or zip code features during checkout. So require that the shipping or billing address in particular matches that of the credit card. A lot of payment processors, again, allow you to do this. Many require it by default. It is a great fraud prevention method. Again, going back to what this attack looks like, often it will be John Smith, 123 Fake Street, Halifax, Nova Scotia, and a given postal code, and I will run multiple cards through this. And most of the time, those postal codes are just generic. I've just picked them out of a hat. It could be that I know what the actual one is. That's always a vulnerability, but often it's just duplicate information that I'm using on every single credit card number that I have in hopes that one may hit. And postal code match is a good requirement to avoid this type of fraud during checkout. Use rate and velocity IP limiting to restrict the number of checkout attempts in a short period of time. And really what that is it's a feature a lot of payment processors offer this. Basically, rate limiting runs within an application like your e-commerce platform or your checkout service. And it's tracking the IP addresses that requests are coming from, tracking how much time elapses between each request. And this really indicates to a payment gateway whether or not these requests are legitimate. It may be the case that a legitimate user comes in, maybe they have a typo in their postal code, or, they have an issue that they have to cancel the transaction and retry. But that's only going to happen within a normal transaction. At most, they're going to attempt to run a credit card 3 times. Probably 2 or 2.5. It would be the average, the mean average. It's not going to happen 5, 10, 25 times in the run of a minute or even an hour. So really rate limiting is the number of attempts that you can make for purchases within a small amount of time based on your IP address. So it's not limiting the number of transactions that your organization can handle or take. It's limiting how many times each individual can attempt a transaction within a finite period of time, within either an hour or a 24-hour period. And this is really a surefire way that I've seen personally for clients work when they're subject to card running attacks. I've seen it work time and time again in tandem with other methods. It really blocks a lot of attempts. And set up alerts with your e-commerce engine for emails for orders. You should be getting these anyway, but in particular, you should review orders, regardless of the same name, when they're coming in quick succession. If you're not expecting if you're not running a sale, for example, and you are getting a number of orders between 1 and 3 a.m., it's probably unusual for your business, and it's probably part of a good, well-run card running attempt. So I would monitor for that, create a process behind going in, canceling, blocking those orders, blocking the IP address that those orders came from within the tools that your payment processor or e-commerce platform has. And work with your payment processor. Ask them or look up on their website what IP blacklists they have, set up monitoring alerts for fraudulent transactions in real time. Get on the phone with them, ask them questions. They're very helpful. They want to avoid fraud, chargebacks, auditing, and they want you to help them do it. So they will give you tools or advice on how to do that. Work with them as an external partner and a trusted partner. I mean, if they're already processing your payments, you both share the same vested interest in reducing credit card fraud and financial fraud. Brute force and password attack prevention. So there are a lot of sites that already have this. If you've ever been locked out of your bank, if you've ever been locked out of a social media platform like Instagram after failing your login credential, your password check multiple times, this is an example of a rudimentary brute force prevention method. Basically, giving yourself so many attempts Another example would be at an ATM. I believe most banks give you only 3 attempts at a PIN before the machine will eat your password or your debit or credit card. And this really comes down to, given infinite time, a team of monkeys writing at a typewriter can recite all of Shakespeare front to back in chronological order. And given enough time and energy and resources, an attacker could break even a semi-complex password over time. And that's really because it's really quick and cheap and easy to run a brute force attack. So strong, secure passwords on all accounts and devices as well is key. Again, stronger passwords have much more efficacy than passwords that are more frequently changed. So I would typically recommend going with 1 password, of course, per account, using accounts, using different passwords, and for every single login you have, with no exceptions, but making them more difficult. And making them not connected to you, not susceptible to social engineering, like birth dates, child's birthday, where you had your first kiss, nothing that would be remotely linked back to you through social engineering standards. Mine, I haven't changed. I'll give you an example. I'm going to tell you what my password is, but I will tell you that I haven't changed my password since 2015. It is a string of 16 digits, characters. It's alphanumerical. It has symbols, upper, lowercase. It hasn't been broken. It still won't be broken. I welcome anyone to try. It's not going to happen. It's going to take way too much time and resource for it to be worth it for anyone to do so, but I certainly welcome it. The password, the strings of characters, the numbers, spell no words, and the numbers, symbols, the letters in their order mean nothing to me, absolutely nothing to me. I've memorized it well. I have a muscle memory built up around it now, but they mean absolutely no social engineering will ever get it out of me, and no social engineering will ever, even through my friends, my family, will ever tell you what it was. In fact, they don't know it, and there's a reason for that. And because every person that may know confidential information, such as a password, is another vulnerability. And for my key accounts, for my master accounts, I don't change the password because I know it well, and it's less vulnerable because of its complexity and because I don't change it. Rate and velocity limiting, again, sharing this example of having the amount of passwords attempts that could be run in a span of time, minutes, hours, it would be ideal. Blacklisting country IPs. If you know your team aren't going to be attempting to log in from, say, hotspots like Russia, France, Pakistan, Iran, India, Nigeria, you don't have customers coming from there. Sometimes it's just easier to blacklist the ability for these country IP addresses to attempt to log in, or perhaps blocking them from even visiting the site entirely if you can't sell to them, for example. I can't stress this one enough. Using multi-factor or 2-factor authentication is key wherever and whenever possible, without exception. If someone breaks your password, they're probably also not in possession of your device. That is key. Having a backup, having to enter that code. Often you don't have to enter it every time you log in, depending on the type of account, but often you can save it for 30 days on that device, and that's fine. But use 2-factor authentication. I've seen it save really save their businesses, and save really painful tooth pulling like exercises from having to be undertaken because 2FA caught the attempt. And use a password manager. As I said, use different passwords for every single login you have. This can be difficult. As I said, they have to be secure passwords. These are not password 1, password 2, and so on. These are secure, non-social engineering susceptible passwords. Use a password manager. Use something like LastPass, 1Pass. There's a few out there. My organization uses LastPass. Everything that we store, all of our client information, all of our information, all the shared information. We never send passwords through emails. We never send passwords. We never store password in text records or spreadsheets on our shared Google Drives, for example. Don't do that. Use a password manager. There are sharing functions within a password manager that keeps that information, the data, the text of the password encrypted from end to end, and there's no way to exploit a vulnerability to that. And our LastPass accounts have 2FA, and I have super admin access to destroy or limit access to any of the users in our organization. So I have multiple hurdles that someone would have to get over. Someone would really have to come and take my devices. Even my laptop can access LastPass without 2FA, without multi-factor authentication also being inputted successfully. So use that. Use a password manager for all of your logins, save for maybe a couple, like your banking, whatnot, and keep those individual passwords that you're using, whether it's for banking, your Gmail account, the LastPass account, or password manager account itself. Keep those separate, but other than that, use the password manager. The other benefit is these password managers have, they will test, they will monitor your emails, they will monitor common websites where data links are posted. They will monitor for if you have an account that may have been compromised, and they will generate secure passwords for you based on criteria that you input. Malware prevention. So malware, as I said, comes in many shapes and sizes and forms, but and it's very common, but it is easily avoidable. It's easy to implement, to inject script into someone's website with malware. However, frequently backing up your website, your hosting instance, your data, it gives you something to revert back to and control and have as a record should your website become infected. Constantly updating, just in hand, making sure that your plugins, your apps, your platforms, your operating systems of your phone, your Mac, your MacBook, your laptop, your PC are constantly up to date are key as well. Having out of date, vulnerable to exploit operating systems on your personal devices, your work devices, is something that I could use to get in. It's a much more complicated method, of course. It's not as easy as social engineering, but it's still a vulnerable method to attack you, your customers. Put myself in a man-in-the-middle situation where I'm actually receiving your customer data. And ultimately, it's avoidable, and recovery from it can be quick if you follow some of these best practices. A firewall and antivirus software and using it routinely, scanning, are key ways that you can avoid malware, and you can identify when malware has come up or has been installed or attempted to be installed in your system. And I always recommend always use premium plugins and tools for any purpose. You get what you pay for ultimately. When it comes down to it, developers who are getting paid to do what they do, continue to update security, look for exploits. If they're getting paid to do it, they're keeping you safe, keeping their software credible and safe. And they're also getting paid for what they deserve, the hard work that they've put in to do that for you. And install a security specific plugin, especially a premium one again. One we'd recommend, there's a lot of WordPress users, I'm sure here, people who have experienced your WordPress. Use something like WordFence. WordFence is a great, has a free version, which sort of gets your feet wet, gets you used to it, understanding what role it plays, the significance it plays in your system, on your website, and your e-commerce, your WooCommerce experience. And it has a premium version as well, which I would also recommend and we do use. It has a great number of features. A lot of the prevention methods I talked about earlier, blacklisting IPs, two-factor authentication for your WordPress logins. This will help you set that up. It's very open source, so it'll work with virtually any WordPress installation. And on top of that, there's a lot of the great premium plugins that we would recommend. Have a lot of great, easy to read, easy to follow installation guides, troubleshooting guides. There's a lot of resources out there that support and supplement your knowledge or knowledge gap when it comes to using these. DDoS prevention. This one could be tough. It does really require continuous monitoring of network traffic. If you're under attack, you can consider temporarily offlining the website or disconnecting the network from the internet during an attack. It could prevent further damage. It could prevent infrastructure damage. It could prevent further monetary loss or cost control. And website security tools that remove web-based threats, block abnormal traffic, and search for known attack signatures are key here. One of those, as I mentioned earlier, would be WordFence. That is another feature of it if you're a WordPress user. Another one that virtually anyone can use, short of some sort of technical requirement or implication you may have, is Cloudflare. Cloudflare has a very robust, also great freemium model. They have a great free tool. I've seen a lot of organizations, big and small, that never go past the free model, their free service. If you have specific requirements, you may need to pay for it. And even then, they have a $20 a month option, but it will save you in the end. It's going to act as your name server to host your DNS settings. So basically, you'll hook your domain to it. And then from Cloudflare, it will point to your website. It'll mask your DNS records if technically possible in your situation. And ultimately, it will protect you from DOS or DDoS attacks. It'll use their infrastructure to gate extremely abnormal activities. It'll look for those known attack signatures of DOS or DDoS attacks for you in real time, and it will protect your DNS from being potentially falling into the hands of bad actors. So I could not recommend Cloudflare enough. We use it for our website. We've recommended it and implemented it for a variety and multitude of our clients' websites as well. Very simple to set up. Simply requires your domain registration account, understanding the basics of DNS, very, very basics, A records, MX records, making sure that you're not blocking your real legitimate users or traffic after you've set it up. However, again, lots of resources, YouTube videos, step-by-step guides on the Cloudflare website. And I would really recommend implementing that as soon as possible. IoT. So this one's a difficult. Again, it's hardest to defend against because you may not know what is exploitable. Spending more on devices isn't a catch-all. It's not going to catch everything. However, using brand name devices, you do get what you pay for. You get better support if something goes wrong with the device. You also get typically greater firmware updates. You can check this manually yourself, going into your device settings, looking at the current firmware version or the firmware version versus what's recommended by the manufacturer. Typically, one of the biggest and most common routine updates they're making on top of performance improvements would be security improvements. They're kind of the less sexy, more boring update notes you might read, but they are imperative and they are important to function, and they're important to your cybersecurity risk. So keeping devices up to date, keeping a strong password for every device in your network if possible, and keeping strong passwords for your home and business Wi-Fi networks. And the reason I say both, even though we're talking about business context, is, again, back to social engineering. If I know your business Wi-Fi is well protected, well, I could infect you if you are the president of the company, if you're an owner, if you are a key team member who may have access to the business's financial information or banking information. Maybe I'll follow you home and see if you have a password on your Wi-Fi router at home. I've seen it be the case where that is a vulnerability that could have been exploited in a situation that I was aware of, where the president of the company, their company is fairly small, but they have ties to past customers who are multinational energy providers. So they're really the secondary sort of unintended target of an attack. But if I find out through social engineering they are very vulnerable, they are my gateway into attacking a larger organization. So keeping operating system firmware and software up to date. Again, if something allows you to put a password on it, please do. And ultimately, just like plugins, just like other apps, try to use only the least amount of devices you absolutely need, especially in a business context. If you have something that's there and not being used, it's lying dormant, unplug it, don't use it, uninstall it, deactivate it, get rid of it if you know that you can and it's not going to compromise anything by doing so. Don't have things kicking around collecting dust, because they will be out of date and they will be vulnerable for exploiting. Prevention policy and procedures. So now we're going to talk about how to really create a policy that governs how to protect data and keep accounts, assets, information secure within your organization. So really what the goal here is to prevent the spread of threats, mitigate to any degree the amount of impact an attack will have. And you should create a policy and institute it immediately that covers key personnel, who's on the response team, what their roles are, include decision makers, people that have access or have been access to large accounts, and really outline who's going to be able to get up at 1 a.m. And cyber attacks, hackers, they don't work 9 to 5. They don't care to make it easy for you to respond to them. They're likely going to come for you in the middle of the night. And while that sort of does sound like fear mongering, it's likely the case. It's just the honest, objective reality that we live in, unfortunately. And the other reality is you may be unaware of it while it's happening, and that's okay. But putting all of these prevention measures in place will hopefully buy you time to where you can react and you can get the emails. You are aware of what's going on in relative real time, or at least as real time as is reasonably possible. And you're able to then react and know how to react from there. Confidential data, personal and company devices, creating a policy that covers both, because as we said, every person involved, even just someone simply on your Wi-Fi network, is a vulnerability, is a liability to you and the greater strength of your network. They can be a weak link. Emails, how to manage emails, such as phishing emails, where you can sign into accounts. Password management, again, going to instituting a password manager and gating how and when and who should be accessing passwords, not just putting it on your whiteboard for all to see. Really gating who and putting a lot of controls in place, just as you would have financial controls. You wouldn't want anyone with the ability to assign a check from your organization to themselves, to their friends, to others. So why would you want them to have password control? It should really be taken just as seriously as your personal or business financial information, your banking information, your credit cards. Those passwords shouldn't be on display. You wouldn't walk around with your, as you may have seen an ad with someone's social security number or social insurance number or their credit card number. And you probably wouldn't want to broadcast that to any client or customer who may walk in, or any bad actor who may be posing as a client or customer and wants to socially engineer you during a meeting. Multi-factor authentication, how to set it up should be covered. Also, who's responsible for governing it and what types of MFA are available to you and how you're going to enforce them should be covered. How you share data and how users can gain remote access as needed. Of course, work from home. Most of us now, especially in our industry, are work from home or have some sort of need for remote access. So this should govern what is required to successfully obtain and maintain a secure remote access connection. So review the policy with your team regularly. Again, keeping people in the know, following it yourself without exception, because creating exceptions creates liabilities. Following it, enforcing it on your team is one thing, but also enforcing it on yourself the same way is key, because you can and will be a liability if you are cutting corners, even for the sake of convenience or ease. You will be a liability in your own organization, and I don't want to see that happen to anyone here. But it is easier to enforce it on others. Make sure you have controls in place that it is enforced on you as well. And ultimately, we can help today by circulating a sample policy that you can sort of customize and adopt for your organization. By no means is it legal advice. By no means is it something that is going to undergo strict scrutiny from your cybersecurity insurance company. But the main thing is you have something put together. It's a basis, it's a baseline to go from in order to help adopt this into your culture, really into your operations as well. And one idea that I have been mulling over recommending to our current clients, one idea that I've been sort of mulling over is this idea of instituting a bug bounty, really paying people to attack you. This is not an advisable step for every business out there. You'll likely be dealing with unscrupulous actors, people with a deeper understanding of your own systems than you do, people that are not there to help you, but just to get paid. So you're dealing with people that may be smarter than you, at least in terms of cybersecurity. So take this with a huge grain of salt. But if you are confident you have a good system set up and feel confident in your position, and you can afford it, pay bug bounties. Pay people, whether with money or products, free hotel stays, whatever you're able to offer up as a bug bounty, institute a program and help them, work with people to put your systems through the ringer, fish your own people, your own team. And if they're successful, or if they give you information that can help you avoid someone who may not be wanting to do this for any good reason or payment, pay them and get how they've done it, why they've done it, what methods they've used from them. Make sure that it's all covered, and they might be able to help you avoid a future attack by a less scrupulous or even worse actor than themselves. There are a lot of good or white hat hackers out there. There are a lot of people who are hacking for good and wanting to help social good or social organizations out there learn about their own systems and their own cybersecurity infrastructure. You might automatically associate these with large financial rewards, but that doesn't have to be the case. It could be scaled up or down to fit your organization's requirements and expectations. And you can use, you can really use it as some sort of way of rewarding good behavior, of good advice. Of course, you'll need to understand how to vet this information that you're receiving. You may need to vet it with your payment processor operator. You may need to vet it through a trusted advisor or vendor. A cybersecurity firm or organization that is tech savvy enough to vet whether or not what they're presenting you with is factual, is worthwhile paying for. There are a number of reasons that I wouldn't advise it, but it could be something that you could avail yourself to and get some lower cost cybersecurity labor out of potential hackers or hackers that are here to help. Because ultimately the service that they provide is something that you could go to a legitimate vendor for, that you could go to a large scale firm to get what it's called penetration testing or pen testing done on your systems. But unfortunately, there's a huge barrier to entry around pen testing. It's extremely expensive when it comes down to it. It is, you're likely, there's a lot of costs involved, a lot of manual labor and time of developers, of expensive high salary developers involved in this. So it's very valuable. I'm not negating the value of that, but for most small businesses, they're not going to have the resources to be able to afford to pay for this. I see pen testing, basic pen testing going from as much as 50,000 US and up, and it's just not reasonable. And it's unfortunate that it's not reasonable, but it's not reasonable for small businesses to be able to afford this. So this is one way of sort of creating your own scrappy way of getting around that. And the screenshot here is actually from a site called bugcrowd.com. And actually they post for all to see common platforms that could be big companies who have bug bounties published in sort of a marketplace, and hackers can go in and find a bug bounty of a system that they're interested in, or they're interested in the financial value of the reward, and they can go in and find exploits with certain guidelines as is outlined in each of the marketplace products, and actually go in and conduct an attack and try to win the bug bounty. You've seen probably OEM operators that have offered this in the past, like Apple, big producers, Samsung. They pay out millions of dollars a year in bug bounties, and that is honestly one of the biggest ways that they find exploits of their systems, their software, their hardware, their tools. So now we've covered it all. We've covered a lot of the prevention methods, but really, what can we do during and after an attack? Even with all that prevention, you may still find yourself under attack or having been victimized by an attacker in some manner. even an attempt, and you'll need to find out how did you get put in this position, and really what to do during and after an attack. What can you do in the immediate steps, and what can you do on an ongoing basis? So here's some basic steps to think about during and after an attack. I always say, going back to assuming that everything is vulnerable, assume the worst and really trust nothing. Assume that all live site files, code, and resources are compromised and must be quarantined or destroyed, and they're no longer valid or usable to you. Because you need to be aware of the back door, and assume that the attacker has left a much easier way to come and enter your infrastructure, your site, your files, accounts, your systems in the future. They've left a way that is much easier than getting in the first way, as a way of a backdoor entry for them. Mobilize your cybersecurity response team. The first thing your company should do when a cyber attack is discovered is to mobilize your response team. This should be a team of cross-discipline professionals if you have the resources. It could be not just users or administrators within your organization. It could be your developer partner that's involved in protecting your business from such attacks. It's important that each team member has been properly trained or is aware of what their role is and knows precisely what to do and create steps in and during an attack. You need to identify the type of attack. For them to for this team to react and respond appropriately, you must be able to identify the type of attack. Once you know the type of attack that's occurring, you know the steps and of what to do next and where to focus your attention on how to best contain and recover from the attack. You need to not only know just the type of attack, but likely the source and the extent of the attack and its probable impact as well. So contain the breach. Also known as turtling or quarantining, most passive attacks are designed to provide the attackers with a persistent backdoor into your system so that data can continue to be extracted over time. It may not happen all at once. So it's important to identify and shut down all access the attackers may have to your system, to your website, your infrastructure, your accounts. The same is true, obviously, if your company is the victim of a more active attack. So whatever type of cyber attack you experience, your team really should move promptly into disconnecting the affected network or devices from the internet, disable all remote access to the network, reroute network traffic, or creating a landing page for the website should you be able to regain control, and change all vulnerable passwords immediately. And when I say vulnerable passwords, I don't mean even weak passwords, all passwords, if you discover you are subject to an attack, because that password may be stored now somewhere else. The key is to completely deny the attackers access to your system. You can then work to return the system only once you've completely denied access and turtled to hopefully put into a more of a secure working condition. Assess and repair the damage. So once the attack has been contained, you need to determine which, if any, critical business functions have been compromised, what data has been affected by the breach, which systems or accounts have been illicitly accessed, and whether any unauthorized entry points remain. Also look for sort of what activity has occurred as well, especially in financial records or credit card statements, for example. Systems may need to be reinstalled, compromised data may need to be restored from backup copies, and any damaged hardware repaired or even entirely replaced. Use a backup of the site to restore the instance or a landing page. In the meantime, as I said, create some sort of way to not lose credibility to your customers or to search engines. Report the attack. It's also important to promptly report the attack to the proper authorities. The RCMP in Canada here recommends any victim of a cybercrime, fraud, or scam contact their local police. It's also recommended, whether you are a victim or not, to report using the National Cybercrime and Fraud Reporting System. This can also be found on the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center website, which the RCMP recommends reporting suspected phishing scams, whether or not you're a victim, to the CAFC, or the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. And there's a form available on their website and an email address as well. If your company has cyber liability insurance, contact your insurance carrier for advice and support from there as well. Communicate with customers. If you have marketing or communications department or team, work with them to how to best manage the public impact and really brand credibility and perception of a cyber event. Your customers will likely need to be notified, especially if the attack impacted any customer data, financial or otherwise. It's also important to issue a press release potentially regarding the incident. And you may need to be upfront and transparent about the attack in order to maintain their trust. However, I would also recommend at that point also potentially getting legal advice if you are going to convey specific details of how, when, and what was impacted. And ultimately learn from the experience. It does suck that it happened to you, but document everything along the way. Your organization needs to learn from the experience. There needs to be a silver lining of this massive black cloud. Do a thorough investigation and investigate how to change your systems and procedures to ward off future attacks. Use this incident to ultimately get smarter and grow stronger with regards to your company's cybersecurity. So here's a bit of a plan outline. And ultimately what we're going to do is we're going to share a worksheet, a PDF work document in the next day or so with all the attendants of today's webinar. And really that's going to help you create and make sure you have a checklist ahead of time. Really want to make sure that your policies are written and established ahead of an attack. You want to have your team members and their roles defined, who will responsible, such questions you want to ask yourself that you'll see in this guide are: who will be responsible for securing accounts? Who has administrative level control over the accounts and the infrastructure? Who has really the knowledge, the expertise, or the capacity to make important decisions in real time, either during or immediately after an attack? You want to inventory all your assets, accounts, hardware, software, anything that has any touch point to your systems or login credentials. Put in place controls and convention methods. Define the steps in a checklist that will help during an attack, a literal one-page checklist that you'll want to be able to go down and making sure that it's planned out now while there is no emergency, while you're not in the midst of an attack. That'll really help you prevent from missing steps when you're under duress, stress, anxiety, and ultimately succumbing to the fog of war. There'll be a lot of chaos and phone calls being made if the attack is serious enough, and you want to make sure that you're not missing the fundamentals. Review with your team the plan, ultimately making sure that everyone who's involved is familiar with the latest trends of what's happening, and also what you're going to do more specifically should an attack unfortunately happen to you. Report the attack, as I just mentioned, to your local police, to authorities, to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center. If there's something that can be learned here, hopefully law enforcement and the general business and public at large can learn from your mishaps or misadventures, can learn what you did right, and share that with people in your community. Communicate with customers, again, putting this in your plan, having a specific detailed way of how and when you're going to communicate certain items, what channels you're going to use. If you have a blog on your website, if you have a Twitter account that is secure, picking which channels you're going to use to actually in real time communicate back and forth with customers is key. Having something secure and having a way to know that, using a secret code or message within posts that is coming from someone on your team is also key. And ultimately, create a shared document and way of document a sort of a post-mortem of the attack, creating a template and having that in your plan and your checklist is key, because you'll want to write down, whether in hand notes or electronically in minutes, and have meeting minutes recorded of what you did, what was successful, and what was impacted. This may be sort of something that comes in view of any future attack, or it may be helpful to law enforcement, or it may be helpful to others who can sort of learn from what happened for you. All right, I think we've covered most of our topics today. I hope everyone is, I hope I've had a good mix here of not speaking over anyone's head. Really, my goal here was to sort of bring it all into view and make sure that the terms that I've used are very clear. You don't necessarily need, again, a technical savviness or background, or cybersecurity background in particular, to hopefully understand all the topics and types of attacks and methods and prevention initiatives that I've covered today. But hopefully you're able to understand, and hopefully I've spoken here today in a language that everybody can easily understand. So I'll take,
Sorry,
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh yeah, thanks, Joel. Of course, I'd encourage anyone on the call to ask any questions. We do have two questions here, and this is from Terry, and the question is Google a safe password generator and saver of said passwords?
Google, I assume, thank you for the question, Terry. I assume by asking if Google is, I assume you mean Google Chrome as in the web browser. So yes, ultimately, Google Chrome now has a native function, a function that's not an extension or an add-on that will save passwords. It'll generate passwords, I believe, as well. Yes, I would say it's a reliable function. There are some limitations to it because it's kind of an add-on function to the core Google Chrome browser. It's not quite as robust as a dedicated password manager. I would say that it's safe to use, but I wouldn't use it as your password management system, especially if you have others that you need to share with or an organization that requires multiple users. It's just not as robust yet as a password management tool. But in day-to-day usage, absolutely, you can save passwords to it. It's as safe as if you're using Google Chrome, you have a login, an account set up in your Google Chrome when you install the browser for the first time. It's as safe as that account is fundamentally. So if your your Google email account has been compromised, they may be able to get control of those passwords as well. So keep that in mind. So it's sort of with a grain of salt, but ultimately it is safe and secure.
So yeah, so Terry had followed up that I use it in conjunction with Norton.
Norton, okay. So you're probably, I would say if you're using it in tandem, so it sounds like you have a good couple of systems catching information. Again, it's still much better than using a spreadsheet, a text record, a written record, physically written record of passwords. So it's definitely going to do, if you're a sole operator, especially, or if the only one using those accounts, it's definitely going to do what you need it to do. It's also free. And in conjunction with Norton, so I assume like an antivirus, those are two really, really good methods, whether you're a Mac or a PC user, of keeping things secure. Norton has some extensions now, I believe. AVG, some of the other, historically antivirus operators or firewall operators have more of a robust or more comprehensive method for capturing passwords and managing passwords, for checking for email spam and phishing scams as well. So I would say sounds like a pretty good little system you've got started. Those are certainly key components of the infrastructure, and I would certainly recommend continuing with that and building on it.
You know what? It's funny because I have challenges with, they keep getting you to change your password, but then you forget because you have to use so many passwords, and then you have to. And I've taken to keeping a track of it somewhere digitally. Although I'm sure you tell me that was a bad idea. However, I just have trouble because you have so many passwords, and they keep if you get it wrong, then you have to reset it. And it's just can be such a hassle, right? But we all know how important it is. I think that answers everyone's questions. Ryan said that was really good, Joel. Very understandable and relevant. Thanks. I learned a lot. Which
awesome.
Is the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And I do have a couple of questions that we received ahead of time. I'll just kind of breeze through them right quick. I received a question from a participant that said, how do I keep online payments and scheduling safe? Hopefully by everything I outlined today, ultimately using premium plugins or tools for processing, scheduling, bookings, payments when possible, and working with your payment processor. Will I need access to my website to participate in this session? No, but ultimately, if you are in this session, you should be probably someone who is a website administrator, someone who is responsible for your website or has a touch point, has access to. So you don't need it for right now, but you certainly do need it. You will need to have admin access control over your domain registration, for example, in order to implement all the suggestions that we made today. Who to call when you've been hacked? Unfortunately, getting good help is both difficult to find and extremely expensive. I think ultimately, between short of law enforcement, having trusted partners in your circle, someone they can email, call if there is a problem, whether that's your developer, your web developer, IT support team, or your payment processor are probably the ones you want to call first. I have two more here. Is my website secure if it is on AWS or Azure? Again, some hosting platforms, some infrastructure backend platforms are better than others. But if you're self-managing, again, websites, I can't stress this enough, are inherently fragile and not secure. So there's no good answer to this. There's no one answer. There's no guarantees with any platform. That's really the disclaimer I have to give for any question like this. And do cyber attackers focus on a specific industry or sector more than others? Overall, yes. I think anything in healthcare, financial services, and construction are big ones. It's because there's a lot of big fish, because there's a lot of financial resources that will pay if ransomware is installed. And as a rule, the bigger the perceived value of the resources, assets, or financial position of the company and in its industry and its reputation, the greater the target, the bigger the fish.
So I just want to mention to anyone on the call that Joel is one of the Ask an Experts on Digiport. So if there's any security concerns you have or anything that Joel offers, really encourage you to go to Digiport and sign up for that. Sorry, Joel, I stole your thunder, but you can expand on that. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, and Nick, thanks for that. And that is really my call to action here. I've left my email here. There's a link here to book time with me. You can find me on Digiport and BizBeacon. But ultimately and sadly, I'm seeing a lot. My team is discovering a lot of accounts locally here in Halifax that have been complaining on Instagram that they've been compromised. I know one that we all might know here, Halifax Retails. Recently, he lost his account on Instagram to fraudsters. And sadly, most of the bookings that I've had lately through Digiport and BizBeacon have been to do with cybersecurity and compromised websites, accounts. People with blacklisted IP addresses now because of unscrupulous actors, or people that aren't able to send or receive emails because their mail servers have been blocked. That's one of the most common things I'm seeing right now. And what it comes down to really is, with all the great government programs and funding, the grants like TDAP, like DAP-SB, that Digital Nova Scotia and Tourism Nova Scotia have been so great with handling. And so really, I, as an operator, I think there's a ton of value in these programs. However, the reality is there are now, because, in part because of programs like this, and cyber attackers and hackers are aware of this, there are more websites, especially e-commerce websites, than there have ever been before, and that changes that increases day to day. So there's more soft targets. There are more easy pickings out there for attackers to either flex their muscles and flex their skills with, or actually get information from. So as the amount of small businesses that have websites and e-commerce platforms increases, so should the attacks. And that's just an unfortunate circumstance. It's certainly by no means a knock on any of the programs out there arming small businesses with state-of-the-art robust tools, because I think that is still overall a net positive. But it's just reality, and something, and that's really ultimately why you're seeing so much of this coming up.
Okay, well, I am going to take the screen back over, Joel. That was excellent, and again, I think the value is going to be there for anyone here today, but also anyone that's listening after the fact. So just give me one quick second. I'll share my screen and take over there. So thanks again, Joel, and appreciate the time today.
Awesome. Thanks again, Nick. Thanks for having me. Thanks to Digital Nova Scotia and Tourism Nova Scotia for helping coordinate this. I hope to do more of these in the future. And again, there'll be resources available on our website, and I'll ensure that those are circulated to everyone that attended today. The presentation, the recording of this, of course, that you'll be handling, and the free resources, the policy template, and the plan checklist, we'll circulate that to everyone via PDF.
Okay, thank you, Joel. Really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Yeah, you
Stay safe out there.
All right, give me 1 second here and get reacquainted with my screen. So our upcoming, so thanks again for joining us today, and really would encourage you to join us for our future webinars. Next, we have Thursday, March 24th, 8 Steps to Traffic Growth Approach, presented by Allison Knott. So this is going to be a great webinar. Allison has presented before, so hopefully you either participated in her last webinar or have watched it after the fact. These webinars are all made available through In Touch. So any webinar we have coming up, you'll be able to find it there or at our website, tourismns.ca/webinar-series. And we just wanted to let you know that there is a new program for accommodations operators, and that's the Tourism Marketing Assistance Program. And it helps registered accommodations implement marketing activities to build demand in 2022. There's also the Regional Marketing Assistance Program that will support organizations responsible for promoting and marketing a region, specific tourism region, as in to inspire traffic around the province. So the links are there to apply to these programs, and the deadline is March 18th at 4 p.m. So any questions on these programs, let us know. Encourage you to apply if you qualify, and really happy that they're available for industry. That's all we have today. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.